let's start out by introducing what everyone's names and what they do for Rare.
What?
Who wants to
I'll
go
go
first?
I'll go
Okay.
first. Okay. My name is Notion. Official title, I guess, is co-artistic director. But I work on the script. I work on like helping like manage our archives and just kind of keeping track of what we have. I do some dramaturgy, and that's most of it.
Yeah.
helping manage the production that we just did and doing a lot of like the scheduling and paperwork. And social media announcements, the nice fancy ones, and our email.
Yeah. Okay. I'm Ronnie. I am also, like, official title is artistic co-director. That's sort of what all of our title is at the moment. I work on revisions. I am the treasurer. I handle the money. What else do I do? Just general advising. I just help with everything.
You also do archive stuff.
I do. Less than you, but I do. I'm the one who will open every single file we have and compare all of them.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm McKenna, official title, also artistic co-director.
Yes.
But I sort of arranged the interviews between original cast members and us when we were still doing that. I work on the script. I do the historical background things for script stuff as well. And I don't know what else I'm supposed
to. You make the dolls.
Oh yeah.
You make the dolls.
I make prototype prop stuff as well, and some costume idea stuff.
And you organize the Zoom meetings.
That too.
I mean, not prototype prop stuff. Your doll was used during the workshop. So that's no longer prototype.
That's not a prototype anymore.
That's on stage.
That's a stage-used doll. Don't undersell yourself.
Okay. I didn't know if it counted.
It does.
Okay.
Okay.
So, question for everybody. What is exactly the Raggedy Ann Revival Effort, and why is it so important to you?
The Raggedy Ann Revival Effort is a volunteer effort to revive the 1986 Broadway musical Raggedy Ann. It flopped, and it hasn't been performed legally in the US in English since that Broadway production in 1986 until our very first workshop that happened this February 2025.
And what started this?
Yeah.
No, so you're gonna say something.
Yeah. It started off more of like a lost media thing because there was almost nothing available from this show. I think in total, like less than 15 minutes of footage, if that, and most of that was from the Rag Dolly in the USSR documentary, and then a couple little bits from news clips, and then at one point we only had a demo, an early workshop demo, and then later we had a Broadway bootleg, and all of that was before we came along. But when Gwen started this, that was it. There was a script. There was a script, but no one who had the script had made a super like detailed description of the script, and it was also only of the Broadway version.
Yeah.
Yes.
So
No, it was Kennedy Center.
Right, it was Kennedy Center.
It was not Broadway.
It was Kennedy Center. So like at that point when Gwen started this, like the main goal was just to find more material about this show. There was also the thought of reviving it, but that was kind of like very up in the air and very like, oh, this would be fun. And this would be cool to start working on. But the main point was finding more material, and that's the first thing that happened. Well, the first thing that happened was finding more sheet music and more scripts and just more articles about it. But eventually, so this started February of 2021.
Yes.
And September of 2021, we had full footage of early production of it.
Yes.
The 1984 Empire State Institute for the Performing Arts production, where
That's
it was
the one that's
originally.
available on YouTube.
Yeah. And then it was after that point where we kind of went, okay. And then after spending some more time searching for a few other pieces of material that we were not able to find. And then at that point we went, well, let's put all of our energy into the revival. Like that's,
Yeah.
we'll have full footage of this show and we'll have a full album of this show if we make it ourselves.
Yes. And I do
Yeah.
want to say that that's not when we started on the revival. Literally the very first day that the revival effort even existed, we had a script that we were working on. So
Yeah.
like that,
It's just,
it just sort of took a back seat for a while to the lost media search. But once that was done, we were like, okay,
So what
let's do this.
Yeah.
what motivated that lost media search in the first place? What's everyone's connection to Raggedy Ann, the musical?
Okay.
well, I think Max should start with this one.
Yeah, Max
Okay.
should start with this one because she was the first.
Okay. So in 2013, I think, Garrett Gilchrist and Vinnie Ritol were the first researchers of this show, and they eventually found some demo tracks that I think were in the hands of a collector somewhere, and Vinny ended up posting it to his YouTube channel.
Are they
And they were
like the people that you mentioned?
help. No,
What?
What was the question?
What was the question?
What was the question?
Kind of what is kind of your connection to that? Are they archivists, or do you know?
Yes, they are
They're-
archivists.
Okay.
They're very much like internet archivists. Garrett Gilchrist is known for the Thief and the Cobbler recobbled cut. So they're both people who, you know, they archive lost media and lost films and they restore them, and like write Wikipedia pages and IMDb pages. They're very much like, and we were friends with both of them
Yeah, we are.
at this point now, like through this.
Now we are, not when this all started, but eventually.
yeah.
Yeah. All right, keep going.
Continue.
I felt the need to mention them first because without them, I wouldn't be into it.
Exactly. No,
But,
they're very important.
Yes. So Vinny posted the demo tracks to his YouTube channel, and I was like 12 and had just gotten into Raggedy Ann in general, and I liked Broadway musicals, and I was like going through my thing of researching Raggedy Ann on YouTube, and I came across the demo tracks, and I went, oh, Broadway musical, Raggedy Ann, wonderful. Let's listen to this. So I listened to it, and that essentially spun me down a rabbit hole of doing research for several months after that. And then I kept going because I have, I'm not going to get into my super personal connections, but
Yeah, that's fine.
I fell in love with the story, and I had a personal connection to some of the story elements, and and especially like some of the darker things, like Marcella being a dying and potentially disabled child. It really struck a chord with me, and I kept going, and eventually I wrote letters to some of the original cast members in high school, and I'm still in contact with several of them to this day. And I messaged Gwen on Tumblr and joined Rare once a few months after the server started, and here I am.
Yeah. I think a lot of us who are very invested in this show have a very personal connection with it because it's a show that deals with grief and illness and divorce and all of this. And I know that's what really struck the chord with me with this show. When I found it, I was going through a lot of grief in my personal life. Um, and it just sort of like worked for me, you know. Um, I found the show in like 2019, I think. And it was sort of a fluke. Uh, but because I had been, or I'm kind of an animation nerd, so I was going through Richard Williams's filmography because he directed and animated the 1977 Raggedy Ann animated movie. Um, so I watched it and I thought it was cute. I was like, that's cute. I would watch that again. So I sort of was in the Raggedy Ann world at that point a little bit just from the movie. And then just through random scrolling on Tumblr, I found someone talking about the musical. And coincidentally, it was someone I had already followed on Tumblr. Um, and I went, oh, I like musicals. And the music was done by Joe Raposo, who also did the music for the movie. So I looked into it and found out that it was Lost Media. And I went, oh, I like Lost Media. So um, that's sort of when I really joined like the very small community that there was. Um, and I started searching for things, and I did find one thing, and it was I always forget his name, Jeffrey
Jeffrey
Lyons.
Lyons.
Thank you. I always think of Rick Lyons, but he's a Muppet performer.
Two different things.
Wrong person. Um, Jeffrey Lyons' review of the show, which is one of the rare positive reviews of the Broadway show. But I found that on archive.org, and it had a clip from the Broadway production of the song Rag Dolly, and I cut it out and I uploaded just that bit to my YouTube channel. And then uh, eventually, I think just like maybe a couple months later, I got a DM on Tumblr and a comment on my YouTube from Gwen saying, will you join my Discord server? I want to revive this show. And I went, okay.
And what's
I was
Gwen's
in
role?
college. Go
And what's
ahead.
Gwen's role in Rare?
Gwen is the founder. Gwen does the same thing that we do, but is also the one who started it all. Um, but yeah, Gwen messaged me. I joined the Discord server February 11th, 2021. Uh, and I was the first person to join that Discord server. Um, and I decided to, lend my efforts, my energy, my skills. I was studying theater at the time in college, so I had some relevant skills. But yeah, it's just like been kind of a journey.
Yeah, I mean, I'm the last one out of us to find it because I found it in March 2021. Yeah, like it definitely it's a very personal show as well, just because there isn't a lot of media aimed for a young audience that deals so openly with grief. And I was also in college for theater. I was in college for theater tech at that point. And like I think it did show up like right at the perfect time of my life, right? I found Ragdolly 3 months after my mom died, and I just went,
Yeah.
this is the show. This is my whole life now. Um and yeah, like I was in college for theater tech, was already interested in writing for theater and doing dramaturgy and stuff like that. But and also Lost Media. Like I had already been a Lost Media fan for a bit. So the idea of getting to join a search that was related to theater, because most Lost Media searches are cartoons and movies and such. And we realized why. Because like doing a Lost Media search for theater is tough because it usually isn't filmed in any way that can be available. Like most
Right.
Yeah.
popular shows, like most popular and successful shows, will not have much like concrete recorded media about them. And so it became, well, the way to make it as concrete as those successful shows is to make it licensable.
Right.
And that's the actual difference there. Gwen's role, I could say Gwen's backstory.
Sure. It's
Uh,
way
uh,
simpler than all of ours.
yeah, it is. Gwen's backstory is that when she was in school and also studying theater, she watched the Colin Looks Back video about the movie and the musical, and then that day said, I'm going to be the one to bring this back, and started the Tumblr and started the Discord and tried to start finding people. So Gwen's role, like co-artistic director, founder, she did most of the producing and directing for the recent workshop because she managed to she got it produced through the Ohio University student lab productions.
Yes.
And that was like almost all her. like
Yeah.
making all of those arrangements and actually getting the people together and putting the show together was almost entirely her. She's also our connection with our lawyer, with our legal counsel. And I think that was part of the reason that she decided that she could be the person to do it, is because she knew that she had that connection. And so she knew that she had like a bit of a leg up already to be a bit of an edge already to have that connection for the legal counsel to make this happen.
So you're kind of on that track, but what have you done with the licensing? What's the complications with all that? Obviously there's some legal trouble. How
Yeah.
you want to
Before we started all of this, the show was in legal limbo. It didn't have any licensing at all. It didn't even have a copyright. Or at least it was hard to find. I think it does actually, but it was really difficult to find. And because the show lasted only 5 performances on Broadway, usually when a Broadway show runs on Broadway, it'll run long enough that the book and the music become like one entity in the copyright. But Raggedy Ann didn't run long enough for that to happen. So the book and the music were separate, which is a whole thing. Um, also, both the playwright and the composer are dead, which was an obstacle because we get compared to the Carrie revival quite a bit. And the thing with the Carrie revival was that it had the original like creators on board with it. And that's sort of what made it successful because it had the original creators on board. We can't do that because they're both dead.
Right, so that obviously makes
Yeah.
it more complicated.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And also like Raposo, they were still separate, partly because it hadn't run very long, and partly
Yeah.
because Raposo was very dedicated to keeping the copyright for his work separate.
Yeah, Raposo's the composer, by the way.
Raposo's the composer, Joe Raposo. So like the couple of the songs which are from the movie originally, Blue and Rag Dolly, they were able to use them because they were not connected to the movies. Like he retained his songs as a separate entity from the movie, which allowed them to sing Blue on the Muppets. It allowed Carol Burnett to sing Blue on her album.
Yeah. And
So
there are a couple. Go ahead.
Yeah. Can you kind of explain why a show needs to run a certain amount of time in order for the book and the music to okay.
That's just
No
how
one
I
ever
don't
explained
know.
that. It just kind of is.
I think it's I don't know if it's specifically because of the short runtime. I think it's a lot of just the very chaotic backstory of this show. I think there are probably shows that did get that set up earlier on. I think it's like in workshops, in out of town tryouts.
Mm-hmm.
For various reasons, either if it was the short run time, if it was the very like, constantly making changes and constant rewrites of the script, or if it was Raposo, digging in his heels and, wanting to retain his own songs in some way.
Or just like the infighting.
I said the turbulent history of the show. Because of that, there are a lot of reasons why, and also just that when it flopped, everyone kind of just wanted to leave it behind.
Right.
Like they considered working on it again, all this stuff. But I think it was just, like it was a bit of an open wound at that point, and they didn't pick it back up. Regardless, the end result is that because like there is a copyright, but is Justin Gibson's name, and the songs are separate. So regardless of kind of how in all of the chaos that didn't get figured out, once we had looked into it, we realized that we were basically starting from scratch. That like there's enough of a copyright to prevent us from just taking the script and running with it, but we could not, we were just starting from scratch, which I think made things a lot more complicated, but I think it also simplified some things because there was not a long history of there was no one was going to fight us for it.
No.
So what does that kind of mean, starting from scratch? Because obviously you have the script. So what elements?
Yeah.
When you were negotiating the copyright, what was kind of like that?
Starting from scratch, more like there was no license for us to work off of. Like the show, there was nothing. It was just like the different parts of the show were owned by different people. And so we kind of had to just contact everyone instead of just contacting if it had a license or if it had a copyright, singular copyright, we could have just contacted one entity, right? So it's really been our job to make the license and combine the two parts of it. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So how did you get the license in the first? Not the license, the copyright.
I can, yeah.
Yeah,
so at one point, I have the date for this.
Yes.
I can grab it. Yeah, I've been doing a research on ourselves, and now I have the date for this. There was a point where we thought, so we were looking up kind of how to do the license, and we realized that we were trying to figure out how to contact the estates. So the Raposo estate is actually pretty open to people talking to them about the show. Like Ivy Austin, the original Raggedy Ann, has talked to them about the show, and Gwen managed to make contact with them fairly easily.
And like really early on too.
And very, very early on as well. I'm grabbing it right now. So yeah, I'm just gonna stop talking as I find this.
I'll talk.
No, I found it. I have it.
Okay.
Yeah, so Gwen was able to contact the Raposos like from the beginning, from February. And there was a point at the end of 2021 where we realized that, and no one had contacted the Gibsons at all. No one could find them. But we realized that William Gibson's other work was licensed through Concord Theatricals. And we looked at that and we said, okay, so Concord Theatricals must have some legal connection to the Gibson estate to be able to license his other work and to be able to pay them. So we asked them, we didn't hear back. We asked them through a lawyer, and then we began to hear back early 2022 of just, they didn't know the show existed.
Yeah, the Gibsons had no idea that Raggedy Ann existed, which is a little bit funny.
They had no clue.
So and it just began, this process of just saying, this script exists. We cannot perform it without your approval, without your consent.
Yes.
Legally. Here is what we would like to do to change the script. We provided a list, a general outline of things that, we thought needed changing. And they approved that. And we began working on it. We began that discussion. But yeah, it is a lot of back and forth. And it has started with workshops of just, our current contract says we are allowed to perform workshops that we do not charge tickets for.
Yeah, we can't make money from this.
We can't make money directly from ticket sales. We can't make money directly from ticket sales.
Right.
We can't bar entry for money. We can make money. We cannot bar entry for money. So we've been working on that, and it's just this process of convincing them that it's worth putting their time and effort into, because our legal counsel, the legal counsel from Concord Theatricals, the Gibson estate, which is William Gibson's two sons, and the Raposo estate, which is Joe Raposo's son, Nick Raposo. All of those people are putting in effort and money, even just to talk to us, even just to have this discussion. So we are sort of building it from scratch because this show was such a flop that we sort of have to prove that it's worth putting more and more effort and more money into as we go. And so they're a little cautious, and also they're like, who are these kids?
Yeah, we're nobodies. When like normal revivals happen, it's not done by a bunch of theater students.
Mm-hmm.
It's done by like producers.
Yeah. On Broadway.
Yeah.
Or like famous actors who fell in love with the show and get their producer friend invested in it, or whoever runs encores.
We're basically unheard of.
You were a bunch of nobodies.
Yeah.
Who decided that we liked this show and we're gonna do it again.
But that means you have more passion. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And it does give us some points, because sometimes people are like, oh, I want to support, youths. I want to support upcoming theater artists, and I do think we sometimes get some points for just being like our passion and just being like a charming underdog story. So sometimes we get points for that.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So you mentioned a turbulent history. Do you want to, with the, I know this show has been in the US, it's been the USSR, kind of.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. It's got a long, fun story.
Should I explain it or do you want?
I don't know. We can take turns. I know you have more details than I do.
Yeah, I'm not going to go into super detail.
Yeah. So, how far back should I even go? I'm gonna start with like
So at the beginning.
right, but like the beginning could mean like 5 different places.
The beginning could mean Johnny Gruelle's daughter, Marcella.
Right. I'm not gonna start there. I'm gonna
Yeah,
start
don't
with
start
the
with the actual
movie.
Raggedy.
I'm gonna start with the movie and
Yeah.
say
Yes.
the movie happened. There's a 1977 animated Raggedy Ann movie with music by Joe Raposo. It flopped at the box office. Um, and then Joe Raposo, I think he had a contract to make a Raggedy Ann like stage production, like a musical, on stage. I think that was what was it? Go ahead.
So Patricia Snyder,
Thank you.
producing director of the Empire State Institute for Performing Arts, watched the movie, and actually the movie was originally conceived as a stage show, and then they went back to the movie. Watched the movie and said, I want to make a stage show. And she contacted Joe Raposo, and Joe Raposo was on contract to work on anything Raggedy Ann related that would involve music. So he was not contracted to make a musical, but he was contracted that if someone did make a musical, he would be part of it. To continue working within the Raggedy Ann licensing. So Patricia Snyder was very much the orchestrator of this entire thing, as the producing director of the Empire State Institute of ASIPA. To make, they made a lot of children's shows. They made a lot of family theater and children's shows. Was one of the things that they got funding from the government to make children's shows. And, you know, the first production in 1983, they got Timothy Mason to do the script, and it flopped. It did not do well.
Bad. I was going to mention the Thackeray play before that.
Oh, yeah.
That's why I started with the movie. Because I
wanted
to
mention the
mention
Thackeray
play. So there is a direct stage adaptation of the movie, written by the same person who wrote the screenplay for the movie. And I believe it was originally meant to have the songs from the movie in it, but
we don't know.
Maybe, I don't know. But it doesn't.
So these two versions are different, the Thackeray play and the other. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. The Thackeray play is a direct adaptation of the movie. And that is licensable. Like, you can perform that. It's been performed many, many times. It's called Raggedy Ann and Andy. Yeah, that's it about the Thackeray play, I think.
Yeah, and so the 1983 version by Timothy Mason and Joe Raposo is nothing like the movie. It includes
it's nothing like the movie, and it's nothing like the version of the show that we know.
Yeah.
So it used more of the songs from the movie, but the plot was completely different. They go to a circus. That's kind of all we know. And so that was December of 1983. And Patricia Thackeray, too many Patricias in this history.
There's 3 of them, which is too
many. Patricia Snyder, like, that was contracted then to perform another Raggedy Ann workshop. So they did the show, they did the 1983 production, planning to do more workshops of it. And they had like a year to do it. And they did it, and it didn't do well. And so they decided to look for a new playwright. And she turned to William Gibson and got him on board. However, because of their contract, they had to have the next production in winter of 1984. So he had months to rewrite this, like, I think July.
Wasn't he brought on in July or August?
Yeah.
And
so he was brought on.
Was in December.
Yeah. So he writes the script. I'm not going to go into specifics because a lot of it's not confirmed. But essentially, there was a lot of back and forth on whether William Gibson's style of writing, which he had never written a show intended for young audiences or even family audiences, and Joe Raposo's style of composing, which, you know, he had composed for The Muppets and Sesame Street. Like, he was very familiar with writing for young audiences, and he had this, and even beyond just like the child-friendly nature of it, they were just vastly different styles, different writing styles. And Gibson also had never written a musical at that point. He would come in as a Butterfingers Angel doesn't count.
I wasn't gonna say that.
He came in as this. He worked on the script for musicals later, but this was his first time like writing a musical. So the writing styles of the main two creators very much clashed, and this kind of like came out in the personality and in the rehearsal room and in like the revisions. That, you know, it was tough to get the completely different things and the different styles that they were working on to actually come together. And then you add the director in there.
I was gonna say.
And you add Patricia Birch, who is director, choreographer. She worked on Grease. And
Grease 2.
And Grease 2. And now you have 3 different people who kind of all have varying styles that are coming into this show, that were brought together by the producing director because these are people's work that she enjoyed, and these were people that she had worked with, and they didn't have any previous projects together. Well, Birch and Raposo had worked on the show before, but like these weren't previous collaborators in the same sense as a lot of like a lot of Broadway shows are worked on by people who. So, and they had a very, very short time scale to get everything done. And then they had another short time scale a year later to get the 1985 production up and running. And so I think there's just, you know, there's a lot of oversight. There's a lot of like competing ideas. And there was pushback from some audiences, from specifically one person. But there were pushback from parents about the dark themes. And that caused, you know, it didn't really make them change anything, but it did cause, you know, some press about the show, and some, like, they had to scramble to figure things out, and I'm sure it causes more stress. And then especially between like the Moscow cultural exchange, that was January of 1986, and that got a lot of press. And so they decided they had to, like, that press was kind of used to, you know, go, oh, we should go to Broadway, we should continue to do this.
Yeah, it's sort of, they used that to fast track it to Broadway.
Yeah. And they went to the USSR at a time when the Cold War was still going on. So why did they decide to go to the USSR at the time?
There was already like a cultural exchange program with the with ASIPA, with the Empire State, whatever. ASIPA. Thank you. I always forget what it's actually stands for. Empire State Institutions for the Performing Arts. Anyway, there was already a cultural exchange happening with the SEPA, and they had done it years prior, with
in the 70s.
In the 70s, thank you. Did they send Wizard of Oz there?
Yes. I believe they sent Wizard of Oz there in like 1974.
Yes. And yeah. So there was already this pre-established relationship. And that's why they did it again. I don't know.
So the person who organized it was Natalia Satz.
Yes, Natalia Satz.
Who ran what was the Moscow Children's Theater and now has been renamed to the Natalia Satz Children's Theater, because she was such a tour de force in Moscow, in Russian children's theater and just theater for young audiences across the world. She created it.
Yeah,
essentially.
she is the person who created and pioneered children's theater. Just in
And
general.
in general, so she and Patricia Snyder were already friends. And they organized that first cultural exchange, and then they were still, even though like borders closed again and they couldn't do it again, Italiasats came over to the US to see the original 1984 production of Raggedy Ann, and she fell in love with it. And because like she was so important in like just cultural theater, like, and you know, had government connections, that she was able to get them to allow this cultural exchange to happen. It's so much of that is because of like just Natalia Satz's position and the amount of hard work that she had done, and the like very strong and very good at convincing people. And so she saw it in 84, and she decided that she wanted to bring it to Russia. And they spent all of 1985 trying to get that to happen. And they did not actually like sign, you know, the paperwork and get everything in place until the beginning of December of 1985 was when they were finally legally allowed to make this happen. And then they left New Year's Eve
They did.
of
The
1986.
the American company left for the USSR New Year's Eve 1985 into 1986.
Yeah. And it was like just a massive success. And
yes. It was it was a massive success in the USSR. The whole cultural exchange was very important politically. um, what am I trying to think? My brain is elsewhere.
Yeah, so it was
Pick
a
up
very
somewhere.
important exchange. How was Raggedy Ann received differently in Moscow versus in the
Yeah.
US?
Well, part of it, I mean, part of it was just like that style of theater was not common there. They did not often have these big glamorous like huge sets and tons of costumes and like big dance sequences. Like just the theater was different there, and didn't it was more ballet and opera, or it was, you know, more folklore and movement pieces, or it was straight play, like
or straight plays.
yeah, straight plays. Like you had all these elements, but the idea of the Broadway musical the way that we have it was not really a thing. So like
Right.
that was very fun.
And the original productions of Raggedy Ann are very spectacle heavy, which is very much the style of 80s Broadway. It's
Yes.
just you're throwing
Very
spectacle
phantom.
in everyone's
Yeah.
faces. So that's
Yeah.
what they tried to do with Raggedy Ann. Did it work? But
Yeah.
the Russians loved it.
And part of the success as well was just the atmosphere. The show itself was still mostly in English. They sang some songs in Russian, and Ivy Austin, who played Raggedy Ann, would do occasional asides in Russian to explain the plot, or to like important lines. She would mimic them. She would say them again, that other characters had said. Other characters would say something, and she would repeat the line, but in Russian, so the audience could understand. Although most of the audience were like political leaders and their children, so most of them spoke some English. But so I think a lot of it too, at least of that specific production, was the atmosphere. But as far as in general, I think a lot of it is just that they were starting with a blank slate as far as the character was concerned.
Right.
Like
Because-
Raggedy Ann is a very American character.
Yes.
Go ahead.
To the
Go ahead.
Sorry, I was
No,
just
you're
going
good.
to say that she's to the point of essentially being Americana now.
She is
She is.
Americana.
Yeah.
That's just a fact. Um, Raggedy Ann is such an American character that most or all other countries have no idea who this character is. No clue.
Or did at that point in the 80s.
And especially, yes, in the 80s. Once the internet happened, then exchange of information. But in the 80s, anyone outside of the US, no idea who Raggedy Ann is. So we think that also helps with understanding and accepting the show, because if you have this predisposed idea of what Raggedy Ann is, which most people think like, oh, Raggedy Ann is this sweet, childlike character, it's all puppies and rainbows, right? And then you go see Raggedy Ann the musical, and it's like this kid is dying, her pets died, her mom's dead.
Yeah, it's very 1930 kids story, which is very appropriate because Raggedy Ann was a product of the Great Depression.
She was not. Raggedy Ann was not a product of the Great Depression.
No.
Raggedy Ann was created by Johnny Gruelle in 1915. That was when the first book came out. First Raggedy Ann
Yes.
book was 1915.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I bet what I meant by that is like it became more popularized in the Great Depression because
Also not true.
oh wow, that's
But
okay.
like I understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
She's from a simpler time.
She is from, quick correction, the patent was 1915, the book was 1918.
That doesn't matter. I don't care.
Well, I need on record, I gotta say it.
Whatever. It was sometime in the 19 teens.
Yeah.
The reason why Rag Dolly is set in the Great Depression is because that is when William Gibson's childhood happened.
Yeah, he was a kid he was a teenager, wasn't he?
He was a teenager.
In the
Okay.
1930s during the Great Depression. And so that's why the musical is set in the Great Depression. But most people don't actually know that because it's not obvious.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, we're getting off topic.
We are.
Russian
back to
response.
Russia. Yeah, so they're because they're not aware of Raggedy Ann as a character, they had no predisposed idea of what the show was supposed to be like. So they could just accept the show as for what it is. And that helps you like accept all of the stuff that happens and the themes and the,
Yeah, and I also think, this was the 80s. This is Reagan era. Around the time. This is very much like when we are cracking down on like unwholesome, entertainment and stuff like that. And I think, during that time there is this push towards kids media having to be a certain way and having to like have these values. And I think that part of it was that as well. Just like a lot of reasons that Americans were going in expecting something that was light and fluffy and would be cool to bring their kindergartners to. And in Russia, they have like continued to embrace darker fairy tales and like the aspect like just of this fantasy and this fairy tale. And in the US it's very much this time of like we're going to pretend everything's okay and we're not going to talk about the things that are dark and like that people are struggling with and scary politically. But in Russia, like this was a very, very tough time and they were not hiding it. Like they were more, I think, willing to accept something that like dark things happen and our art will talk about those dark things happening. and help us, feel better through talking about it happening and expressing it. So I think largely, just a general cultural approach to how that's talked about in like the kind of fairy tales and the kind of stories. And then it continued to be performed in Russia.
Yes, I was waiting until we were
Yeah.
going to get to that. Raggedy Ann, the show, the musical, is still performed in Russia to this day, without the music. They don't have the music. But it's been performed probably thousands of times at this point,
Yeah.
which is
Yes.
crazy. That's crazy.
It's insane.
And no one knew about this until we found out.
Yeah.
I mean, like a couple people who were still closely involved with the original show were like vaguely aware of it, and
Yes.
but I don't think anyone had done the same amount of digging that we have into the
Right.
various Russian and Ukraine.
Yes, and Ukraine and Belarus and lots of
Czech,
different Czech Republic,
yeah,
Czechia, I think is what they're called now.
I'm not specific. I don't want to. Lots of like countries in that area that are still performing this show.
Mhm.
And I think that I do think a couple people who were involved with the show were aware of that, but the amount that like we've really dug deep into what the show has become, like why this keeps being performed. Like,
Yeah.
isn't it what like just like that original cultural exchange wasn't just it wasn't just really popular, but it spawned like 40 years of the show becoming a staple of children's theater in this area.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's great. Kind of wrap up question. So
Yeah.
So what has doing this show and joining this community mean for you? And where do you see the Raggedy Ann Revival Effort going from here? What's the next step?
Yeah. Well, the next step for us is more workshops. I'll say that. I think so. This whole experience has been incredible for us. We've met some of our closest friends through the revival effort. Um, we've experienced things that we probably would not have experienced. We've done a ton of traveling. I don't know, we've met so many wonderful people and it's been so great. I'm so thankful that it happened. um, and I hope in the future that we reach our goal of making the show licensable, making the show available to be performed by anyone, really. Schools, community theaters, regional theaters, anyone who wants to perform it can perform it. That's our goal. That's what we want to do.
Yeah, like Lorani covered the second half pretty well. So as far as just what this has meant to me, like this has been like my again, like I found so many of my closest friends through this community. This has very much been like, a wonderful thing to be able to focus on, to put my effort into. We have learned so much about theater and about how to create theater through this, about the process, about, research and dramaturgy and licensing and just like, getting a show off the ground, what it means to work on something this complicated, what it means to organize schedules and dates and like props and budgets and all these little things that go into shows. And for most of us, like this is our first experience with any of that, and our first experience being at the head of something. So to realize that we can do it, that we can have that confidence in ourselves, that we can come into this and we could say we're going to work hard, we are going to do the research, and we are going to pull this together even if we don't have this prior experience, and just learning so much about the community around theater, and that it really is, you know, it is how important it is to work closely with the people that you have around you and have that community, you know, is more important than budget, is more important than, you know, what theater you're performing in. And even if it takes a while. And yeah, like the opportunity to interview Broadway actors, and to like have these serious discussions about theater, and like just the process of rewriting it forced us to learn so much about writing.
Oh, yeah.
Like
Yeah.
like, so yeah, like I feel like I've learned so much that I would not have learned, and I have found so much in myself, so much confidence and so much drive to continue to do theater because of like our dedication to this and because of our successes in this. Mac, you should say something.
Yes.
The beginning is kind of like what Notion and Ronnie already said. I've met basically all of my closest friends through this, and I was a theater like enjoyer before this, but now kind of knowing like a bunch of things more about how it all works and what it takes to pull everything together, and you know, budgeting and scheduling and getting to talk to actors and all this stuff, like it's not something 12-year-old me would have ever dreamed that could have happened. And it's insane, and it's been wonderful, and I hope that we are successful in pulling together what we're trying to do.
So thank you for your time.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
For
Yeah.
first major
you.
vlog interviews. So
Thank you for choosing us. We love talking.